Mr. Carter, this is your termination notice. The folder struck Daniel Carter's chest before he could finish fastening his son's backpack. He looked down at it, then up at the woman standing in front of him. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Meridian Technologies, stood beneath the bright terminal lights of Chicago O'Hare, perfectly composed in a charcoal suit, one hand holding a leather travel case, the other resting beside the folder she had just handed him. Around them, travelers moved toward their gates. Announcements echoed overhead. Daniel's 8-year-old son, Noah, stood beside him holding a small astronaut toy. "Dad." Daniel didn't answer. His eyes remained on Victoria. "You're terminating me," he said quietly. Victoria's expression didn't change. Effective immediately, Daniel slowly folded the termination letter. "Okay." That single word made Victoria pause. She had expected anger, an argument, maybe humiliation. Instead, the man simply slipped the paper into his jacket. Noah looked from his father to Victoria. "Are we still going to Denver?" Daniel crouched beside him. "Yes." "Even though you lost your job?" Daniel tightened the strap on Noah's backpack. "We're still going." Victoria watched them. Something about the scene bothered her. Not because Daniel had accepted the decision, because he looked like a man who had already survived something much worse. She glanced at the departure board, then back at him. "Your company badge is deactivated," she said. "Security will collect it before you leave." Daniel reached into his wallet and removed the badge. He placed it in her palm. "Then I guess you won't need this anymore." Their fingers briefly touched. Victoria expected resentment. There was none. Daniel simply stood. Noah tugged his sleeve. "Dad, come on." Daniel nodded. As he turned away, Victoria noticed something tucked inside the outer pocket of his worn black duffel bag. A silver key, engraved with a symbol she recognized. Her expression changed. Only for a second, but Daniel saw it. He stopped walking. Victoria stared at the key. "Where did you get that?" Daniel looked down at it, then at her. "It was my father's." Victoria's face went still. "Your father?" Daniel nodded. "Why?" She didn't answer. Because 15 years earlier, that same symbol had appeared on documents belonging to a private investment group that had quietly purchased controlling interests in 6 technology companies. A group no journalist had ever successfully identified. A group Wall Street analysts had nicknamed the Phantom Fund. Victoria had spent 3 years trying to discover who owned it. She had never found the answer. Daniel walked away. Victoria remained frozen beneath the airport lights. For the first time that morning, she wasn't thinking about his termination. She was wondering who she had just fired. Daniel and Noah disappeared into the crowd. Victoria looked at the silver key again. Then she whispered to herself, "No." But something deep inside her had already begun connecting the pieces, and she didn't like where they led. Daniel sat beside Noah at their gate 20 minutes later. Noah was coloring a picture of an airplane. Daniel stared through the large terminal windows at the bright afternoon sky. His phone vibrated. A message from his bank. Then another. Then 5 more. Daniel didn't open them. Noah looked up. "Are you sad?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I'm thinking. About your job? About you." Noah frowned. "Me?" Daniel nodded. "You remember what Grandma always told us? Keep your promises." "That's right." Noah went back to coloring. Daniel leaned back. His face looked calm. But underneath the table, his hand was gripping his phone tightly. Because Victoria had made one mistake. She had fired him in public. And Daniel had spent 10 years making sure nobody knew exactly what he owned. His phone vibrated again. This time, he answered. "It's done," a man's voice said. Daniel lowered his voice. "Did they find out?" "No." "Good. The acquisition closes at 6. Daniel looked toward Noah. "Push it to 7. There was a pause. "Daniel, the board has been waiting for your signature for 3 weeks. I know. You're the only person who can authorize the transfer." Daniel glanced at his son. "Then they'll wait." He ended the call. A few gates away, Victoria was no longer preparing for her flight. She was standing inside a private lounge with her chief financial officer, Marcus Reed. "Tell me everything you know about Daniel Carter," she said. Marcus opened his tablet. 41. Divorced. 1 son. 8 years old. Joined Hale Meridian 6 years ago. Position: Senior Operations Analyst. Victoria frowned. "That's not what I asked." Marcus looked at her. "What do you mean? Who was he before Hale Meridian?" Marcus scrolled. "Nothing unusual. Small apartment. No expensive cars. His son attends a public elementary school. He buys groceries at the same neighborhood store every Saturday. Victoria stared at the screen. That's impossible. Why? She placed the silver key on the table. Marcus leaned closer. His eyebrows rose. Where did you get that? From Daniel. Marcus picked it up. That's the Phantom Fund emblem. I know. You think Carter owns it? I don't know. Marcus shook his head. The Phantom Fund controls more than $100 billion in assets. Victoria looked toward the lounge windows. Then find out. Marcus hesitated. Victoria? What? If Carter really is connected to the fund, terminating him may have been the worst decision you've ever made. She turned toward him. I didn't fire an owner. I fired an employee. Marcus said nothing, because the distinction suddenly felt meaningless. That evening, Daniel drove into a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Chicago. His house was modest. 2 stories. Small backyard. A basketball hoop with chipped paint. No luxury vehicles. No security guards. No visible signs of wealth. Noah ran through the front door. Dad, I'm hungry. Daniel smiled. Give me 10 minutes. He put his jacket away, rolled up his sleeves, and began making grilled cheese sandwiches. The phone rang. Daniel answered without looking at the screen. Yes. A woman spoke. Mr. Carter, the Singapore partners are asking whether you approve the final merger. Daniel flipped a sandwich. Not yet. They're concerned. They can be concerned. And the London board wants an emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning. And the private jet is waiting. Daniel glanced toward Noah, who was sitting at the kitchen counter swinging his legs. No jet. Sir. Commercial flight. 7:40. The woman was silent. Daniel lowered his voice. I promised my son we'd fly together. He hung up. Noah looked over. Who was that? Work. You still have work? Daniel smiled. A little. Noah nodded, satisfied. He took a bite. Daniel watched him. For years, Daniel had built his life around one rule. His son would never grow up believing money was more important than being present. That was why nobody knew. Not his neighbors. Not his son's school. Not even most of his employees. Daniel Carter wasn't merely an operations analyst. He was the founder and controlling owner of Northstar Global Holdings, a private technology empire worth more than $1 billion. He had built it quietly after his father's death, beginning with a logistics software company in a rented office. By 35, Northstar had acquired firms in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, medical logistics, and satellite communications. Daniel had never taken his name off the public records completely. He simply buried it beneath holding companies, trusts, and professional managers. He wanted his son to know what it meant to work, not what it meant to inherit. But there was another reason he had stayed at Hale Meridian. 6 years earlier, Northstar had quietly purchased a minority position in Hale Meridian. Daniel had wanted to understand Victoria Hale. She was brilliant, aggressive, relentless. But lately, her company had begun making decisions that frightened him. Executives were cutting employee benefits while increasing executive bonuses. Suppliers were being pressured into impossible contracts. Daniel had stayed because he believed the company could still be corrected from inside. Then Victoria fired him, and that meant she had unknowingly removed the one person capable of stopping what was coming. The next morning, Victoria entered Hale Meridian's headquarters before sunrise. She found Marcus already waiting. You were right, he said. Victoria stopped. About Daniel? Marcus placed a folder on the conference table. His employment history is fake. Victoria opened it. Every document appeared legitimate, but the financial trail beneath it was something else. Marcus pointed to several transfers. Every major investment made by the Phantom Fund during the last 12 years was authorized through the same legal structure. Victoria stared. What structure? Carter Family Trust. She slowly looked up. Marcus continued. The trust beneficiary is Daniel Carter. Silence filled the room. Victoria closed the folder. Get him on the phone. I tried. And he declined. Again. Marcus hesitated. He also canceled his Hale Meridian access. Victoria's eyes narrowed. I fired him. Marcus nodded. And now he's acting like he owns the company. Victoria stood. Does he? Marcus didn't answer. That afternoon, Victoria walked into the boardroom. Her directors were already seated. The chairman cleared his throat. We have a serious issue. Victoria sat down. What? The Phantom Fund has requested an extraordinary shareholder meeting. Victoria's face tightened. Why? The chairman pushed a document toward her. Because they've acquired enough voting power to challenge the current board. Victoria looked at the signature. Daniel Carter. Not a company. Not a lawyer. His name. For the first time, Victoria felt the floor beneath her certainty shift. She remembered the airport. His calm face. The way he had said, "Okay." She had mistaken acceptance for weakness. She was beginning to understand it had been restraint. The board meeting continued for another 40 minutes. Then the doors opened. Daniel walked in. No security escort. No assistant. No expensive suit. Just a dark blue jacket, gray shirt, and the same black duffel bag he had carried through the airport. Victoria stared at him. Daniel looked around the table. "Good afternoon." The chairman stood. "Mr. Carter, this is a private board meeting." Daniel placed a folder on the table. "So is this." The chairman looked confused. Daniel pointed to the folder. "Northstar Global Holdings owns 49% of Hale Meridian." The room went silent. Victoria's jaw tightened. "That isn't possible." Daniel looked directly at her. "You checked." She had no answer. Marcus lowered his eyes. Daniel continued. "And before anyone asks, yes, I authorized the shareholder meeting." Victoria stood. "You were spying on my company." "No." "You were pretending to be an employee." "Yes." "Why?" Daniel paused. "Because I wanted to know whether the company I invested in still had a conscience." Victoria's expression hardened. "You could have introduced yourself." "I could have." "Then why didn't you?" Daniel looked at the board. "Because powerful people behave differently when they know the person watching them has power." Nobody spoke. Victoria slowly sat down. "What did you find?" Daniel looked at her. "Enough." She swallowed. "Then say it." Daniel opened the folder. Inside were reports, employee complaints, supplier correspondence, executive expense records, internal messages. Victoria's face changed as she read. Some of the decisions had been made without her knowledge. Some had been approved by Marcus. Others had been hidden by the chief legal officer. Daniel wasn't accusing her of creating the corruption. He was showing her that her leadership had allowed it to grow. Victoria looked at Marcus. "You knew?" Marcus stood. "I knew some of it." "Some." Daniel closed the folder. "There's more." Victoria looked back at him. "What?" Daniel's voice became quieter. "Your company is being prepared for a hostile takeover." Marcus went pale. "By whom?" Daniel slid another document across the table. "A list of shell companies." Then another. Then another. "All controlled by your chief legal officer." Victoria stared at the names. Her own lawyer. A man she had trusted for 8 years. Daniel leaned back. "He's been intentionally lowering Hale Meridian's valuation, creating internal instability, and preparing to sell the company in pieces." Victoria's hands tightened around the papers. "Why?" "To make himself rich." Daniel shook his head. "No." Everyone looked at him. "He's not doing it for money." Daniel turned toward the door. "He's doing it because someone else paid him." The door opened. Federal investigators entered. The room erupted. Victoria stood frozen. The chief legal officer was escorted from the hallway. Marcus began speaking rapidly to investigators. Directors reached for phones. Daniel remained still. Victoria walked toward him. "You knew this was coming." "Yes." "You could have warned me." "I tried." "When?" Daniel looked at her. "The night before you fired me." Victoria remembered. 6 months earlier, Daniel had sent her a confidential report about irregular acquisitions. She had dismissed it. She had told him to stay in his lane. He had nodded and walked away. Now she understood. He had been trying to protect her. Victoria's eyes lowered. "I was wrong." Daniel said nothing. She looked at him. "I humiliated you at the airport." "Yes." "I thought you were disposable." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "That's what bothered me." Victoria waited. "Not the job," he said. "The fact that you never looked closely enough to see the people doing it." His words landed harder than anger would have. The investigation continued for weeks. The board removed several executives. Marcus cooperated with authorities. Victoria kept her position, but only after accepting strict oversight from an independent committee. Daniel could have taken control. Instead, he did something nobody expected. He offered Hale Meridian a rescue package through Northstar. No takeover. No public humiliation. No demand for Victoria's resignation. One condition: employee ownership. A percentage of the company would be placed into a trust benefiting long-term employees. Victoria read the proposal twice. "You're giving them shares?" Daniel nodded. "They built the company." "And you?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I already have enough." She looked at him for several seconds, then asked the question she had been afraid to ask. "Why did you stay after everything?" Daniel looked through the conference room windows. The city was bright beneath the afternoon sun. Because my father taught me something. Victoria waited. He once lost everything. Daniel touched the silver key in his pocket. He rebuilt his life from a folding table in a rented warehouse. He looked at her. He used to say money can buy you a bigger room, but it can't tell you who deserves to sit in it. Victoria glanced at the key. That's why you kept it. Daniel nodded. It reminds me where I came from. Months passed. The story eventually reached the press. Headlines called Daniel Carter the invisible billionaire. Analysts debated his empire. Business magazines published photographs of North Star's headquarters. But Daniel refused interviews. He still drove the same car. Still packed Noah's lunch. Still attended school events. And every Saturday morning, he went grocery shopping with his son. One afternoon, Victoria saw him there. She was buying coffee when she noticed Noah standing beside Daniel, comparing 2 boxes of cereal. Daniel held one box. Noah held another. Dad, this one has more chocolate. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And fewer nutrients. Noah sighed dramatically. You always say that. Victoria smiled before she could stop herself. Daniel noticed her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Victoria approached. Hi. Daniel nodded. Hi. Noah looked between them. Are you Dad's old boss? Victoria smiled. I was. Noah considered that. Did you fire him? Victoria looked at Daniel. He gave her a small nod. Yes, she said. Noah frowned. Why? Victoria took a breath. Because I didn't understand him. Noah seemed satisfied with that answer. He returned to the cereal. Daniel looked at Victoria. You don't have to explain yourself to him. I know. She glanced at Noah. But I think I owe him the truth. Daniel smiled. That was the first time Victoria had seen him do it without caution. A year after the airport incident, Hale Meridian held its annual shareholder meeting. Daniel sat in the back row. No special seat. No introduction. Victoria stood at the podium. She announced record growth. Employee ownership had increased. The corruption investigation had resulted in several convictions. The company's culture had changed. Then she paused. There is one person I need to acknowledge. Daniel looked down. Victoria didn't say his name immediately. She looked across the room. He taught me that leadership isn't about being the person everyone obeys. Her eyes found him. It's about noticing the people nobody else notices. The room applauded. Daniel didn't stand. He simply nodded. After the meeting, Victoria found him outside. The evening was cool and dry. City lights reflected across the glass towers. She handed him a small envelope. What is this? Open it. Inside was his old employee badge. The same badge she had taken at the airport. But now it had been placed inside a clear glass frame. Daniel looked at it. On the back, Victoria had written one sentence. Not an apology. Not a corporate statement. Just 4 words. I should have looked closer. Daniel ran his thumb across the glass. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he removed the silver key from his pocket. He placed it beside the framed badge. Victoria looked at both objects. The key to your empire, she said. Daniel shook his head. No. He looked toward the street where Noah was waiting beside the car. The key is just a reminder. A reminder of what? Daniel watched his son climb into the passenger seat. That I never want my son to confuse being important with being valuable. Victoria nodded slowly. Daniel picked up the framed badge. He turned toward the car, then stopped. He looked back at her. Victoria? Yes. You were right about one thing. She waited. I did lose my job. A faint smile touched his face. But I never lost what mattered. He walked away. Victoria remained beneath the lights of the city, holding the silver key for one final second before handing it back. Daniel opened the driver's door. Noah leaned across the seat. Dad, what? Did you win? Daniel looked at his son, then at the framed badge resting on the passenger seat. He smiled. No. Noah looked confused. Daniel started the engine. I just stopped playing the wrong game. The car pulled away from the curb. Behind him, Hale Meridian's headquarters rose above the city. And on the passenger seat, beside Noah's old astronaut toy, sat a framed employee badge that once represented the moment Daniel Carter had supposedly lost everything. He kept it there for a reason. Not because he wanted to remember being fired. Because every time he looked at it, he remembered the one thing his billion-dollar empire could never buy back. The chance to be there when his son looked up and called him Dad.